Thank you, Sam. Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Sondgeroth, and happy to be here with you all. And as Sam said in her little opening there about learning wherever you're at, I'm actually in Illinois, so I am pretty far south of you guys, and happy to be joining and continuing on with some Google sessions for Cook County Higher Ed. And so I have in the chat, so as Sam said, and as you guys both know that are in here with us, we are going to be talking about Google Forms today. So in the spirit of Google Forms, I'm going to actually ask you guys to fill out a Google form. It is really difficult. It is 4 questions. So if you can see it, the link that should be dropped into the chat there, it is not difficult. I'm just kidding. If you could fill that out, that's just going to actually be kind of a little bit of a guide for us to kind of interact with here. So I'll give you guys both just a minute and or two to fill that out, and you don't have to get super detailed with it either. All right, and just like that, because I have all of the responses in the background, I'm able to see that everybody filled it out. So I can see that Sue and Eric, you guys actually like submitted almost at the same time. Like that was crazy. It went from one response to Sam's, and then like it just instantaneously went to 3. So you guys are working in sync there. So we're going to be talking about Google Forms today, and what I'm really excited about is that to kind of showcase what we can do, the power that you can have with Google Forms, and I can now see through the form responses that both of you guys are new to Google Forms, which is awesome. I was really hoping somebody would pick let me teach the session, and then I could just like hand it off to one of you. But we're going to explore Google Forms, what we can do with it, how to build a Google form. Just kind of everything that we're gonna, just do as much as we can to get you guys all the insight that you can in the next 55 minutes or so. So with all that being said, I'll go ahead, share my screen with everybody. And as Sam said earlier, if you have a question, go ahead, drop it in the chat. I have 2 monitors going right now, so that way I can see both the chat, you guys, and also my monitor over here. So, okay, so this is our rundown here, where I'm actually going to take this link. I'll drop it in the chat if you guys want to kind of outline of what we're working through. This is kind of just a checklist of things, more organizational than anything super informational, but it does give you a list of all the stuff that you can do if you want to go back through it, look at it. But this is kind of a guide for what we're looking at here. So Google Forms, just as an overview, Google Forms is Google's kind of surveying tool. Microsoft also has a forms option, but what Google Forms allows you to do is collect data. And that can be in a number of different ways. So you can, send out surveys to stakeholders. You can create questionnaires. You can create quizzes, actually, where they self-grade and auto-grade. So if you wanted to, like for today, or for just today, actually, this is not something that was in education, but it was actually for a job that I'm doing. I had to watch a video, even as an adult. I had to watch a video and then take a quiz that showed that I mastered that process of reviewing something in order to be able to complete the job that I was doing. So it's not like, oh, just because I'm a teacher or not a teacher, like I don't have to do quizzes. Like there are ways that you maybe want to set up some sort of auto grading quiz. You can do that in Google Forms. So Google Forms allows us to collect information from people and then display it in a way that makes sense. Also gives us the opportunity to share that data with other people, so we can create graphs, we can create charts, we can create spreadsheets from it, and then we can disseminate that information out to people that need it. So it's just an incredibly versatile tool that you can use in so many different ways, and it's one of my Google favorites for sure, just because of that versatility. So let's get started. We're going to kind of look at where we go to find Google Forms. And when you're in Chrome, which is what I always suggest using, Google Chrome allows you, when you open up a new tab, you have the waffle up in the top right-hand corner of your screen. That is actually also called if you click that, you'll actually see that Forms is an option down there. And you can click on that and you can launch into Google Forms, the homepage for Google Forms. And in here, this is going to give you all of the forms that you've created, but then also the ability to create a new blank form. So that's one way that you can get in and start making Google Forms. It's not actually the way that I prefer. What I prefer, especially with people that may be new to Google Forms, is to go through your Google Drive. Okay, so Google Forms is created through your Google Drive. You organize them in your Google Drive. And the reason I say that is that organizational capacity. Because you can organize your Google Drive similar to how you organize documents and files on your computer. And so you want to put them in maybe with different folders that exist with the things that you are using with that Google form. So I always, like to show that it does exist in the waffle up here, but really from your Google Drive, that's where we're going to create our Google Forms from. So you can see if I click on the New button in the top left corner of the screen, I have Google Forms as one of the options towards the bottom. Shout out Google Forms. It got upgraded to the big boy page about a year ago. You used to have to find it underneath of More, and then it showed up over here. And then last spring, they upgraded it. So it got bumped up to the big leagues. And now it is one of the main options that comes up there. So when you select Google Forms, that's going to open up a blank Google form. But one of the things I want to show, especially for people that are just getting started, maybe you don't even know kind of what it's capable of and you want to explore some stuff. Well, Google actually allows you, if you notice over here, there's this little arrow next to Forms. And that arrow allows you to select a form from a template. And if you select from a template, you open up a template gallery of pre-created forms. And these are all forms that when you select them, they become yours. This is just Google's template gallery here. And you can see there's a form section for education that has exit tickets, different assessments, a worksheet option, a course evaluation. But then there's also RSVPs, party invitations, event registrations, and all of these are pre-created forms that you can use and just by clicking on them, and then it just fills in all the blanks for you. So if you're looking to get started, or maybe you're like you don't want to spend the time creating all of the questions, you're like, oh yeah, I do have an event feedback that I have. I'm having an event. I want to get some feedback from the people that attend. You go into templates, find event feedback here. If you select that, what it's going to do is just open up a new form that is already filled out basically with all of the questions that you may want from an event. And you didn't have to know how to do anything except find the template and then share it out, which we'll talk about later. But this is pretty cool. And then if you need to change things, right? So like how satisfied were you with the logistics? If you just click on that, you can see you can adjust the questions to suit your needs. So that's just a nice feature that's in the option here for Google Forms. Click on that arrow and then go to from a template. And there's lots of different templates to explore. So it's a good place to get started if you have a specific use that you want to use Google Forms for. Maybe they've already got one made. So that's super helpful. What we're going to do though for our purposes today is we're actually going to open up a blank Google form. And so to do that, we'll just click on the new and then just select Google Forms and then we'll create it. And now we have our blank form. So we'll go back to the one that I made earlier. That's going to hang out up here with your responses. But for our untitled form here, you can see this is just our blank canvas. So now we get to put in all the different options that allow Google Forms to do what it does best, and that's collect information. And from whatever questions we want to put in. And there's so many ways that we can gather that information from our stakeholders that are filling this out. So my first suggestion is to always go up to the top left-hand corner of the screen where it says Untitled Form and change the name, because this does not auto-update. And so if you don't change the name, you're going to have inside of your Google Drive a bunch of untitled forms. And that's going to get confusing when you're trying to go back through and find it to look for all the responses to the form that you sent out. And so for this one, we'll just title it CCHE. And then you'll notice that the form title actually updated at the same time. So this is the Google form title, and it thinks that because I named the form that's what I should name, what everybody should see when they open up the Google, which is fine, but you can also you can change that if you want. So maybe if you wanted this to be, something different, more specific, you can always add to that. So just because you locked it in up here doesn't mean that it's locked in down here. Okay, so just something that could be helpful. It is also helpful that it just automatically puts the name in there, because that could save you a couple of steps too. It'll save you some time. So that's our titling of our form. There's also, you'll notice the form description underneath of that. That can be best equated to the instructions for the form. So that form description can just give you some information on, or your user some information on what they're filling out, what's the purpose of it, all that good stuff. So that's just what it describes. It's the form description. What are you filling out? Kind of going through here too, this is the editing window of the form. So this is going to look different than what the end result is. So the end result is going to be more polished and more clean. This background version here, this is what you guys are seeing when you're editing the form and you're filling it out for your respondents to then, put their answers in. And you can see we have some options here. So these are going to be, this is the question tab. So this is where I'm going to put my questions in. When it gets time and I want to see my responses, I'll click on the responses window and my responses will be there. Up on the top here, this is your kind of main Google Form toolbar. So kind of going, let's go right to left. The more options here, the 3 dots, this is going to give you the ability to copy your form, delete the form. We'll go into pre-filled link maybe later. That's kind of Google Forms 2.0 though. Print, so if you wanted to print it out, go a little old school, you're certainly able to do that. This is something that's a little bit different. So I'm not sure everybody's familiarity with like the Google tools, but one of the things with Google is that you can collaborate on Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, all of that good stuff. And when you do that, you want to use what's called sharing. So if Sam and I are going to collaborate on a Google Doc, I would click the share button and share that document with Sam, make her an editor, and then she'd be able to edit it, change things, all of that. Google Forms is the only Google tool that has a different way of stating that. And so Google Forms, if Sam and I want to work together on the same Google form on the back end, we're going to add as collaborator. Okay, so if I select add collaborator, now I get this pop-up window. And then this is where Google gets a little weird. They haven't changed the name. Like it still says add editors up here, which is slightly confusing because that's not what it says when you click on that. I don't know why that is. But then I would share this with her. So I could type in her name, her email address, share it. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow me and her to both have access to change the questions, to edit the questions, to see the responses, all that stuff. So if you have multiple people that you're working on this with, that's a way that you want to be able to give them access. So it would be those 3 dots up there, add collaborators. So slightly different than what a Google Doc does. Some of these other things, script editor, we're not going to go into that. That's kind of super advanced Google Forms stuff. That's how you can make it do really crazy things. I don't even know how to really use that because that's like scripting is coding and programming and all that stuff, and that's not my jam. So, but if you're good at coding, you can actually code a form to do things, and you can also do that with Google Sheets as well. But that's not what we're doing today. Add-ons, these are tools that allow the Google form to do different things that aren't natural to it, if you will, aren't ingrained in the product. So Google is pretty neat in that Google allows third-party vendors to create different programs that make Google's tools work better. And they call them add-ons. So it adds on to the efficiency of that particular Google tool. And so if you click on the add-ons option, this is going to bring you to a store that has different add-ons that you can attach to your Google form that make it do different things. So for example, there is a choice eliminator option. And this add-on, if you put this and if you enable this on your form, it'll eliminate choices as people fill out the form. Okay, so for example, if I send a Google form out to the group and I say which day works best for you to come in and meet with me, and I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Sam is the first one to open up the form and she selects Monday, Monday would disappear when Sue opens the form. It would only have Tuesday and Wednesday. And if Sue selects it Tuesday, that's gone. And so you see, like, so it's cool because Google Forms doesn't do that inherently. You need a third-party program like Choice Eliminator 2 as an add-on in order for that to work. So I know a lot of, I work primarily with educators, and a lot of teachers use this for like parent signups to come in and meet with them. They also do it for in a non so much education way, but like for potlucks, for teacher potlucks, they would put out a form to the staff and say, hey, who's bringing the meat? Who's bringing the paper and plastic tools? Like, you know, and then as you fill that out, then those choices disappear. So just one example of an add-on that you can do. And there are a bunch of them in here. I can't speak to how good or bad most of them are. I only use a couple of them. But you know, it is a cool way that you can kind of increase your use of Google Forms and increase Google Forms' capability. We're going to get to sending it a little bit later. Your settings we'll also talk about in a little bit. Up here, the last couple here, preview is going to, the eyeball is going to give you show you what your form looks like. So if at any point you want to see what the form looks like to your end user, you can click on the little eyeball up here, and that'll show you what the form is currently looking like. And so that's helpful because the edited version of it on the back end will always look a little bit different than the front-facing version. Okay, and so by kind of going up occasionally and saying, I wonder what that question looks like, or does that image really fit there? You can look at the preview option, and that'll show you what it's going to look like when you send it out to the people that you want it to fill out. Theme, over here with the little, you know, the paint, I'm losing my train of thought as to what that's called now, palette. But if you click on that, that's your theme. You have the option to change your theme. Okay, so you have here in your theme, this will just change your colors. So you can see it defaults to purple, but you can change it to different colors if you want. You can also choose an image to go as your header. So the header is going to be up above the title. So if I choose an image here, you can see there are many different images that are, you know, available to you in the image library. So we can select the basketball one for the NBA playoffs that are going on right now. And we hit insert. You can see that the header goes up here, but then also your theme color adjusts to your header. And that's true even if you put in your own. So if I wanted to put in my own image, I can actually upload my own image file from my computer, or I can go to my Google Photos and I can find my own image. So like here's a Cameo logo. So if I select the Cameo logo and insert it, you'll also see that one of the problems with this is that the sizing of the image needs to be pretty precise, or else you're not going to get the whole thing in there. So you notice that the Cameo logo doesn't quite fit. But if I hit done on that, now it's going to update my theme to match the Cameo logo. So it's pretty intelligent in that, and we're just going to take one of these default ones so that way it's not as boring of a Google form as we look through it. So you can see you can change your color, you can change your backgrounds as well. You can change your font styles. Now you can't get super specific with your fonts, but you do have some basic fonts here that you can change your fonts to. So that's kind of the only options as far as like customizing what your form looks like. It's pretty basic. They don't give you a whole lot, but you're going to want to go up here to customize theme, and that's where you're going to be able to change that. The puzzle piece is going to be those add-ons. So if you did use any of the add-ons, if you put those on there, you can find them where this puzzle piece is, and that's going to show you the different add-ons that you have. And so currently I only have one in this account. I have many more in a couple of the other accounts, but again, I don't use a ton of add-ons. I just kind of like the basic forms for that. So that's kind of our tour of what's going on up here. The main part here that we're really worried about is this floating menu bar over here, or floating toolbar. So this toolbar, what this does is this gives us all the options of things that we can add to our Google form. So Google Forms are known just for like being able to ask questions, but it's much more than that. You can add a lot of different things into your Google form. You can add, for example, we would start with the plus sign, and that's going to be add questions. And you'll notice as I hover over top of each thing, this is a good trick for most Google tools. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what it is. So if you're confused or you're like, oh, I don't really know what that is, just hover your mouse over it and it'll show you it'll tell you what that thing does. So the plus sign is going to be our ability to add questions. The arrow with the paper here, the page, that's going to be an option to import questions. That's if you're used Google Forms a lot. Okay, so that's kind of Google Forms 2.0. What that does is if I select that, that's going to bring up an option for all of my previously created Google Forms. And then I can say, oh, I made that Google form yesterday for this topic. Now I want to take these 3 questions from that Google form and bring them into this form. So then I don't have to do a whole bunch of copy and pasting. I don't have to retype it. I can just say, yep, give me these 3, boom, imports them into this Google form. This is an amazing update. So once you start making a lot of Google Forms, it is super helpful. My education example for this would be, so when I would make my final exam, when I taught high school history before I did all this. And when I would make my final exam, I would often bring in questions from my unit tests. So I'd have maybe 7 units, and then I would make my semester final, and I would bring in the questions that I had on those 7 units, and that would be my final. Well, if I made all those tests in Google Forms, I could then import, by using this option, I could import, I could say import questions, find unit 1 test, select the 5 questions from that test that I want to use, hit import, boom, they're right in there. They drop right in. So again, something that once you use Google Forms a lot, that's where you're going to leverage the import questions option. Continuing on, the 2 T's. That's title and description. So this is where we're going to be able to drop in. So if I do this one, you'll see I drop in a title. It's only going to show a title and then description. There's no question attached to it. Okay. So when I have a question here, I've got the ability to add my question and have responses at the bottom. For title and description, this is just for informational purposes for your audience. Okay, so you might have like 3 questions and then a title and description explaining what the next part of the form is going to look like. Okay, so that's only for informational purposes. No questions attached to that one. The next option down is images, so we can also bring pictures into our form. When we add an image into our form, again, it's just going to be a standalone. No questions afterwards. You can put a little description above it and a title, but that's our ability to bring pictures in. And then the next one down is videos. So when we import videos or we bring videos in, those are going to be strictly from YouTube. So the video has to be on YouTube in order for it to display in the form. This is a pretty cool option because as we bring this in, if I select add a video, let's do a quick search for a crash course video. So I find my video that I want, select it, and then that's going to drop the video directly into the Google form. So that means that when my recipients of this, my respondents, are going to fill this form out, they're able to watch the video directly.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course US.
Directly in the form, and then they could answer the questions underneath of that video. So they don't have to go to YouTube to watch the video. They can just watch it right here. There's no extra like, hey, these videos are recommended for you, where they get distracted and they forget to even go back to the form. So that's a really cool option to bring those YouTube videos in. The only bummer is it's only YouTube videos. So you can't bring Vimeo videos in. You can't bring videos you've saved or you've created unless you upload them to Google or to YouTube, I'm sorry. Okay, last thing, and I'm going to pause for some questions if anybody has them. The last thing on our menu bar is add section. So when we add a section, and then I'll get back to adding all the different question types, but when we add a section down here, what this is going to allow us to do is to create a form with multiple pages. Okay, so a section can be equated to a new page. So when you add a section, you have the first page here that you can see has my video on it, this blank question, then I have the next button. And when I select next, I go to another page. So the section allows us to be able to go in and create a segmented Google form. So that way, people aren't just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. You can have it segmented out into different sections, which can be helpful to break the form up a little bit. It can also be helpful if you're changing topics, so if you wanted to give people an option to review different sessions, you can say, okay, this is the section on Google Forms, and then they hit next. Okay, this is a section on Google Sheets, and then they hit next, and this is a section on Google Drive. And so you can have multiple pages within your Google form. So that's kind of like the overview of where everything's at. Like I said, we're actually going to now jump into with the different question types, so that way we can kind of discuss what types of things we can ask our people to respond to. But up until this point, we're 30 minutes in. Does anybody have any questions? And feel free to unmute and ask right now too, or type it in the chat.
And there haven't been any questions delivered through the chat yet. So.
All right. Okay. Well, let's talk about what we can get from our people. Okay, so we've seen what we can add to the Google form. Now, what are the things that we can collect, and what does that look like? And so we've put in. I'm going to delete some of this stuff here. So we'll just have our main, form that has our original untitled question. And so Google Forms, when you open it up, always has a question that drops in. It's always going to be a multiple choice for the first option, and so that's what's here. And then when we start to want to figure out what we're going to type in, I always usually start with like hey, what's your name? Like that's a pretty easy one. And this is where Google Forms is actually like super intelligent. It's gotten smarter as an artificial intelligence, capacities increase. So example, I just click in the question area here, and if I type in what is your name, you'll notice that the question changes. I didn't hit anything. I just typed it in. The question changes from a multiple choice question to a short answer. Google did that all on its own, because it's aware that a what is your name question is more than likely going to be a short answer option. And if you select over here in this drop-down menu, these are all of our different question types. So these are all the things that we can ask our people that we're sending this to when they fill this out. These are all the different pieces of information that we can collect from them. So is it a short answer one? And the difference between a short answer and a paragraph, because both of those are going to involve text collection. So that's where we're asking our folks to type in a response. And the difference between short answer and paragraph is going to be the length of the response that a person can type, and also the size of the area that they can type in. So if it's a short answer, they're going to get one line, and that line will just kind of continue on and on and on and on for like, I don't know what the character limit is, but it's basically like a sentence. Okay, so when I go to preview this, you'll see like the answer is kind of only that long. And actually, if I just hold down A here, and I continue to go through, you'll see that like it just keeps going. Like I can put a lot of characters in there, but it becomes difficult then to like go back to the beginning there. So really, if you're asking your folks to submit more than maybe like 4 or 5 words, I would suggest going with what is the paragraph option here, because that is going to give, you can see the line is longer, and then as people type in that, it just keeps going down the line. So they'll see their whole paragraph that they type. So if I go into a Google Doc, let's see. So I'll just copy and paste this in so you can kind of see what this looks like. Copy that. We'll go back to our Google form here. We have a long answer paragraph in here, so let's look at that in the preview window. Now I'll paste that in and you can see the difference. So you can see it just like gives me a big space to be able to respond to. So that's a great one for that long answer feedback that you want in a certain answer. Whereas if this was a short answer, you can see I can't see the whole sentence. It just kind of blends it all in, and it's difficult to edit and manipulate. So if you're going for more than, say, 5, 6, 7 words, definitely suggest the paragraph option there. Okay. Next up, let's add another question here. So we'll add a question using our plus sign on our toolbar. You'll look here, now we have our option questions. Okay, so these questions are all going to give our end users the ability to choose what they respond by from a list. But they're all going to look a little bit different and give you a little bit of options. So for example, when we put a multiple choice question in, everybody knows what a multiple choice question is, but select your response. And then we have down here option 1, and then I can click on add option, and then I get option 2, and so on. I get multiple different options that I can keep adding different things. So this is select your response. Let's see, Cubs, White Sox, Twins. We'll get the little Minnesota flair in there too. So we have multiple options in there. Now the difference here between a multiple choice question and a checkbox question, the difference between these two is that you can only select one response in a multiple choice. So you're not able to say, I like the Cubs and the White Sox, because nobody should be able to select that option anyways. But you can't do it. It just won't let you. You can't say Twins and White Sox. You can't do that. Like, it's multiple choice is just, even though it gives you multiple options, you can only select one of them. Now, if you wanted people to be able to select more than one, like this time we'll say, and we'll change the question here. We'll do football, baseball, golf. And you say like, select which sports do you watch on TV? Now, for this type of a question, you would want to have more than one ability to check more than one answer. So that's where we would use checkboxes. So when we use a checkbox option, our end users are able to then say, I like to watch all of these things. And they can select more than one and submit the form. Versus a multiple choice, they're only able to select one of those options. So that's really the big difference between those two checkboxes and multiple choice. Now, the drop down is even a bit more selective. So when I do a drop down menu, this one would be where the difference between this is you still only select one, but when you look at it, it's different than a multiple choice because it doesn't show all the answers here until you select the drop down menu. We've all selected drop down menus before, but this is what it looks like when we create them. And then it only lets me select one. And the reason why you might use the drop down versus a multiple choice is if you have a ton of different responses or options for the user to choose. Okay, like if I have a select your name from the list and I have 20 names, I'm probably not going to put that in a multiple choice, because then when my person is looking at the form, they're going to have to scroll, and that question is going to take up a ton of space on that Google form. So I'm going to condense the options down just into a drop down. Another example would be like, which state do you live in? And then you have all 50 states, but you want to like put them all and you want to select that drop down menu. So that way the options are not super long and the form's not super long. So that's why you might choose drop down over multiple choice. So I hope that makes sense to everybody, because that's how I best equate it. Other options that you can bring in. So file upload. This one's an interesting one. So file upload actually allows you to allows your person that you're surveying or that you're sending the form to submit a file to you. So this could be a picture, this could be a Word document, could be a PowerPoint, could be a video, could be an audio file, could be anything, PDF. And when you say, I want to choose, so we'll go to a new option and we'll go file upload. What this is going to allow you to do is collect that file, and it's going to put it into your Google Drive. So if you want people to submit a picture, so we're hosting an event and you send an event feedback form out, and you say, I'd really like you to, if you took a picture at the event today, would you like to share that event, or would you like to share that picture? And that person could open up this form on their phone, select that file upload, See, it would say add file, and then it would open it up and allow them to then select a picture from their phone and then submit it to you. And then it goes to your Google Drive, and then you have the picture. So if you wanted to then share those pictures out with other people or put them in a newsletter or something like that, you'd have access to them because that person submitted it to you. So that's a cool option, to be able to go through and select if you would like to collect images, or like I said, it could be PDFs, it could be anything. Any file type can go in. Linear scale. Okay, so the next option here. So actually I'm going to remove that question. We'll do a new one. The next question down, linear scale. So what that is the one that you guys all filled out to start the session off. That's going to be a option of what's your current comfort level, 1 to 5. It's a Likert scale question. And you can change that from all the way from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, or you can actually like go 0 to 10. But 10 is the highest that you can put in there. And then when you do that, you can then kind of preface what each number stands for. So, I don't know anything, and let me teach the session was our range today. Very scientific range. But that you can type those in once you select that question type. So that's a good option to be able to, gauge what people know quickly about a particular topic. The next two, multiple choice grid and checkbox grid. These two are probably the most complex looking types of question types that you can ask in a Google form. Okay, a multiple choice grid, and I especially find these difficult when you are using them in a way, or when you're editing them, because they don't make a whole lot of sense, like how it's spelled out here. But if we're looking at this, you can say multiple choice grid, or let's do lunch options. Okay, so with my multiple choice grid, what we'll do is we'll put in our rows here. So you're going to have the ability for people to answer like multiple questions all within one question, if that makes sense, which hopefully it will when you see it. So like I want to find out what people's lunch, what they lunch orders, maybe not lunch options. We'll call this lunch orders. And then our rows, we'll put in the day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that's good enough. And in the columns, what will allow people then to select are the different lunch options. So we have our day in our rows, and then our columns are going to be sandwich, salad, soup. We're very generic in our lunch offerings here. So this is now our lunch order form. And so if we go to preview it, this is where it's going to make sense. So now when we go to look at this, you can see that in the multiple choice grid that I sent out to these people, my people that I want to see their lunch from, they can say, you know what, I want a sandwich on Monday, I'd like a salad on Tuesday, and on Wednesday I'm going to go with a soup. But because it's a multiple choice grid, they can't say I would like a soup and a salad. Because similar to the multiple choice question, they can only pick one. Okay, and so that's a nice way to kind of gain a lot of insight on a topic by just having it condensed into one question there. Okay, now you might guess that if I change this to a checkbox grid, what that's going to allow my people to do is select more than one option. So similar to the difference between a checkbox question and a multiple choice question, the grid option would allow them to choose both a soup and a salad. Okay, so you're just allowing people to choose more on the same row. Similar options on the same row. Those questions are, those form types. I think it took me a while or form options took me a while to wrap my brain around how you might use those. In education, I go back to that. This is like a good way to like do matching. Match the person on the left with the event across the top. Who discovered America? Was it Christopher Columbus is in the row 1, and then column is, country is over here, America, and then the explorer that discovered it. And so you can kind of put those across. It's kind of a neat way that you can gain, like I said, lots of different questions into one particular option here. Lastly, we have date and time. Those are exactly kind of how you might envision them. If you put a date in, that's just going to ask the people, they have to select a date. So the little calendar pops up. And time is the same way. So it's just literally that's the only option they can type in. They can't type in like, oh, I'm available on Monday. Nope. You have to fill out a date and you have to fill out a time when you use one of those two calendar options or those two options down there. And those are the different question types that you can put in. Okay. So you can see you can get a lot of different information from people in here, whether it's a short answer question to a paragraph to a multiple choice grid. There's a lot going on. I'll just throw this to the group. Is there a particular type of information that you want to collect that you're currently kind of spinning your wheels on a little bit? And you're like, I'm not sure if any of those question types fit what I want to collect from my respondents. All right, I guess not. So that's good. It's pretty straightforward. Like you're just asking questions and people are filling out the options. There are a couple of things. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure I do it all justice here. So you'll notice that I was constantly jumping back and forth between the preview and the editing version of the form. That's because as you add the Google stuff to the Google form, like other tools in Google, everything is automatically saved. So I don't have to hit publish, I don't have to hit save, anything like that. As I add questions, as I add options, those things become live on the Google form. So every time I added a question, when I reload the Google form, that new question will be there, which is super helpful. Now, that is, though, a little bit of a detriment if you send the form out and you send the form out and Sam opens the form up right away. And then you realize, oh no, I forgot to put a what is your name question in there. And then you quickly go back in and you add the what is your name. If Sam has already opened the form up and it's sitting there, that change doesn't happen. Like she has to hit refresh in order for that form to see her version to see the new update. So it's kind of a static, like once you open up the form, then it is what it is unless that person hits refresh. And that's a problem because as it stands right now this is coming soon, coming later this year as it was announced in February, which we're getting later in the year now from when it was announced in February, there is going to be in the form responses an autosave feature. So that as you are editing the form, or I'm sorry, not editing, as you're filling out the form or as your people are filling out the form, their responses are going to be saved. Right now, it's a one-shot and done operation. So if I was to fill this out, and you notice every time I closed it out, if I had a response and I closed it out, it says, are you sure you want to leave? Your stuff's not going to be saved. Like it's letting you know that close this out, you're done. You're going to lose all of the stuff that you had filled out. And later this year, they're coming with an autosave feature for people that fill these forms out. So that's going to be really helpful, like especially when it's a longer form. People are like, I know I've gotten through some forms and I'm like, geez, how long is this thing? Like it's taking me forever. I ain't got time for this. And then I just like close it out. I just don't go back to it. Now what that would do is it would allow me to save my draft and then I can go back and continue filling it out later, which is going to be it's going to be really nice, especially for education. So let's leave that. A couple of other things. As you're editing your questions here, you'll notice that there's an option down here that you can make them required. Okay, so if you slide this over, what that's going to do now is force the person to fill that question out before they're able to hit submit. So they can't submit the Google form until they fill that question out. Another couple of things, this option here is duplicate. And so if you are, wanting to, like this might be lunch orders week 1, and you're going to have the same thing week 2, but you don't want to have to retype everything out, you can hit this duplicate option. And it brought everything in, and then I could just change this to be for week 2. And then I can duplicate it again for week 3 and week 4 and week 5 and so on. So you can keep, you don't have to recreate it, copy and paste anything. You can just keep duplicating the question, and that'll save you a lot of time on the back end. A couple of other things that we can do. if we change this to, so if we click on the 3 dots, you'll notice that there is an option for every question to go to a description for that particular question. And what that's going to allow you to do is type in just some extra information about that. Okay, so that just is like, you could put that as like your hint if you wanted to. So you can put that in there, that give people more context maybe to your question. That's not defaulted. You have to hit those 3 dots in order to. The thing is that you'll notice there is an option to shuffle option order. So if you're giving a quiz and you don't want kids to, or even adults to cheat on it and look over the shoulder of somebody in front of them, you can shuffle the option order, and that means every time that this quiz is open or that this form is opened, those options will come in different order for each person. So Sam can't peer over my shoulder and look and see what my answers are, because they would be in a different order than what hers were. And that works for multiple choice questions along with checkbox options as well. And that's, I guess I do want to kind of hit on a couple of things before we go into sharing it. The other thing is, you'll notice that there's the image option over here. And when you add an image, from the menu bar, it comes in on its own. There's no question attached to that particular image. So it's just going to kind of stand alone. It's going to just hang out and be on its own. If you wanted to be more specific with that, and you wanted to say, you know what, I want to ask a question about that image, what we can do is when we add a new question, or any question really, you'll notice that there's a little image icon next to the question. So in both drop down, multiple choice, anything, you'll see there's this little image icon. And rather than putting the image in that takes up the whole space in the middle of the form, if I select this, now this image will be tied directly to that Google, or to that question. Okay, so I'll go back in, find my photos. This time we'll put, we'll do that same picture. Insert it in. And now it's actually a part of that question, and you can resize it, so we'll make it a little bit smaller. But when my people look at this, you can see it has the question and then the image and then the responses, versus the other way, which would be add the image in. We'll go back here again. We have to hit refresh to see that change. You can see that image is just hanging out right in the middle and nothing's attached to it. So you could certainly, I would put this in and be like, hey, here's this picture. And then I might add 3 or 4 different questions after that. Like, hey, talk to me about what's going on here. And then these 3 questions after it. But if you wanted to be specific to that question, you can do that. You just have to look for that little image icon there. So just a couple of quick things, as different kind of more unique ways that we can leverage Google Forms. So real quick now, we want to send it to people. Okay, so we want this to go out to folks. There's a couple of things we want to check. Our settings up in the top right corner of the screen. Okay, so the settings icon here, this gear wheel, that's going to give us some different options before we send it out to people. So you'll notice when I select that, I go into general, there are some things I can do. One, I can mandate that it actually collects the email addresses of the people I send it to. Okay, so when I do that, I did not do that for the one I sent out earlier today. But if I do that, it would say, okay, make sure you're signed in with an account. It would then automatically collect that email address and give me that information. You can also restrict different settings. So if you are a part of a domain, okay, so you can make these with a Gmail account. But if you're a part of a domain, so for your work or school or whatever, you can restrict it to people only in that organization. So if I have this box checked and I tried to send this in the chat, none of you would be able to open it because none of you are in Exploring EdTech's domain. And that's a problem because sometimes your domains are actually defaulted to that. And you want to send it out to different people. You want to, I always suggest double checking to make sure that box is unchecked. Because if you do that, then you're going to get a whole bunch of people saying, I can't access the form. I can't access the form. And then you're just, putting yourself through more work. So I would always suggest doing that. The limit to one response, this is going to make people be signed into Google if you do this, because what it does is it says Sam can only fill this form out one time and she can't go back and fill it out again. But she has to be signed in with a Google account to do that. So if you're sending it to people that don't have Google accounts, I wouldn't put this as an option because that might restrict their ability to answer the form. Then you can also give them the option to edit after submit. This is only available though after they hit submit and they get the little box that pops up that says, thank you for completing this form. And it says, edit my responses. If they don't click it right then and they close the form, they close that tab out, they cannot go back in and edit their responses. So, this isn't the saved as draft thing. This is a completely separate thing and it only works for like a split, a little bit after a person fills that form out. The last one here, see summary of charts and text responses. That's going to allow people that fill this out to then see how other people fill the form out. Okay, so if you are sending it out to a board and you want people to see how others have responded to it, you might put this in. You can share that information out later, but for the quick response, quick feedback, you can kind of send that out and it would show what other people have responded. If you do want to make it a quiz, that's where settings up here, you go to quizzes, and then you would slide this across, make this a quiz. Okay, I'm not going to go into super detail about that. That's kind of a whole nother like Forms 2.0. But this would allow you then to put point values and select which answer is correct for each Google form question that you put in. And then your respondent or your people, so in this case, probably a student, could be able to see, like if you say release the grade after each submission, once they hit submit, they'll see what they got. They can see, I got 8 out of 10. I got 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. And then you can also tell them like, what questions you missed, what the correct answers were, and then how much it was worth. So you can set that point value up if you wanted to. All right, now as far as sending it. So we've created our form. Now how do we get it to people? Okay, it's the big button up in the top that says send. Okay, so it's not add a collaborator, it's send. And I say that with like a little bit of it's the one that says send, but lots of people miss like this part. Like it's confusing for people. I've seen people, teachers included, that get done with their form, try to send it to their students, and they take this link and they copy it and they put it in an email or in Google Classroom or something and send it to the kids. And then they wonder like, why couldn't the kids fill the form out? Or why were they able to edit the questions? Well, you're giving them access to the back end. Like you don't want to do that. You want to hit send, and then you have the option here to either send via email, and then you can see you can compose your email directly in this box here, or this is the way that I prefer to do it. I grab the link, and then I take this link and I copy it, and then I put it into an email or I put it into whatever platform I'm sharing it on. You can copy that link, you can embed it into a website for people to then click on and fill out. But this is the best way in my opinion. It just gives you more creative control. I just personally like this a lot better than the embedded in an email option. But I mean, this is fine, this works, but this grabbing the link, putting the link in is just a little bit easier for people to navigate to, I think. So, but that's how we send it. We copy that, we put it onto an email, we put it onto a website, we put it into a Google Doc, we put it into anywhere that you want to post a link and get it to people, and then people can click on it and open it up and fill it out. Quickly, as we are almost out of time, what's it look like when people fill it out? So this is why I had you all fill this out at the end. You can see I go into responses. I have a summary of responses. So I see I have Sam, Eric, and Sue filled this out. I get a pie chart based on the multiple choice question that I asked you all here. And then I also get a bar graph for the Likert scale question of summary of my responses. And then I have my extended response question down here, and it shows me all the responses. Now, if I want to see who specifically said what, I go over to individual. And now I can see here's Sam's responses. So I can see all of them. I can click the arrow. Now I see Eric's. I can click the arrow, and now I see Sue's. So you can see everybody and how they responded. So it's not like, oh, I just have the summary of this. Like, no, you have everybody's individual responses too. And if you want to print them out, you can actually print them out by hitting the little printer here. And that would allow you to print them out. You can see what that looks like here in the print preview. So there's Sue's response. And then I can also, this is kind of now our magic transition, as they say in the radio business, to our next session. You can send all of the responses into a Google Sheet. So this is the reason why I wanted forms and sheets to be on the same day. Green box. And that's key. You have to, old forms just automatically made a spreadsheet. New forms, you have to click the green box, say create new spreadsheet. And now all of your responses go into the spreadsheet. So if this case, Sue wants to share with her board about different, feedback options or, whatever, surveys, we might want to do that from a Google Sheet, because that's going to be an easy way to share those responses. And then once we get into Google Sheets here in 15 minutes, we're going to explore how we might create some different looking graphs and charts from data that's in the spreadsheet, and we can see it. So you can see timestamps over here when that person filled the form out, and also gives you all of the information that you need or that they filled out, and it puts it into a nice clean Google Sheet. So that's Google Forms. We covered a lot in an hour, but that's kind of the point. We want to make sure you guys got all the information possible. There is more. There's always more to Google, but that's definitely the basic overview of it. We can do so many cool things with this. So if you guys are interested in kind of like Google Forms 2.0, let Sam know, let Kelsey know, let the fine folks at CCHE know, because we can do a lot more with this. So with that, Sam, I'm ending on time, unless there's questions from the...
My one question was going to be about editing after submission, so I didn't even have to answer it. You segued right into it. So thank you, Ben. So we will be opening up the room for the Google Sheets session. So I'm going to stop this recording and just get on with that session then. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.